Welcome to the Cybersecurity Summit podcast at Summit Conversation. Hey, Wendy Meadley here at the 14th Annual Cybersecurity Summit, and I'm here with Mike Prado, who is...
Hi, Wendy. Great to be here. I'm the Deputy Assistant Director for Homeland Security Investigations. In that capacity, I run the DHS Cyber Crime Center outside Washington, D.C.
And so, for all of us who Homeland Security means, I'm not sure, but you're keeping our borders safe, how does that apply to cyber?
Well, we are responsible primarily for trying to do our best to keep the cyber border safe as well. So within Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, we leverage our transnational investigative authority to accomplish that mission.
And so there's something called C3 that most of us don't know about, but you do.
Yes, I'm very fortunate to be the senior executive who oversees the Cyber Crime Center, also known as C3.
Okay. And so cybercrime looks like?
Well, it depends on the day, right? So it's rapidly evolving, which makes it, one, very exciting, but also very challenging.
Right.
What we're seeing right now is a tremendous growth, unfortunately, in cybercrime.
Yeah.
The use of generative AI, the use of other automated tools to really not only infiltrate networks,
Mm-hmm.
use of insider threat, whether it's an employee unbeknownst to him or her who clicks on the wrong email or clicks on the wrong link,
Yeah.
or the infiltration and the insertion of malware onto a network, but also a variety of other, cyber type or cyber enabled crime that affects really everybody in the country.
And so that's both personal and professionally, right?
Yes.
And so there seems to be an intersection, I think, for folks that we now understand a little bit more, don't click on this and that kind of thing for personal, but I
Yeah.
think people are still really learning and understanding more about what does that mean at work. And I think the conversations here at Summit are a lot of solutions vendors helping teach us where are those lines, what are those tools, how to communicate with people.
Yeah, absolutely. As the adage goes, knowledge is power, right? And ensuring that your company's workforce, which is generally the weakest link in the defense of your networks,
Yeah.
and educating your workforce on and ensuring that your workforce, your employees, not every employee should have full access to the network, right?
Right.
Basic cyber hygiene still applies even in
Mm-hmm.
today's age.
So you said cyber hygiene, and so liking your employee or trusting them doesn't mean they have to have access to everything. It
Correct.
doesn't mean you dislike them, it doesn't mean they're not trustworthy, but cyber hygiene really goes to what is their role and what do they deliver on behalf of your organization.
Absolutely, and in
Right.
government we practice what we term need to know,
Yes.
right? And applying that to the private sector, I
Yes.
think certainly information sharing and breaking down silos in a collaborative manner is always important, both in government and in the private sector. But in today's world, again, giving your newest employee the keys to the kingdom to your full network is really potentially a recipe for disaster.
Right, and so when you're looking at different touch points across organizations, whether they're private or public or that kind of thing, because I'm based on your role, I think you're looking at it all and in having that bubble that's around us, right? Making sure the bubble holds, right?
Absolutely.
What are the things over the next year, no secret sauce, please, but just generally that folks could be keying into, maybe a couple tips of what should you be watching for? How could you ensure your cyber hygiene is better?
Yeah.
What are some steps?
Well, obviously, again, ensuring that the basics still apply.
Okay.
Ensuring that your software is up to date, getting those patches done, making sure that you're, certainly some companies have better ability to upgrade their systems,
Mm-hmm.
but even your most basic systems have those patches that exist out there, and you can get those patch updates from both your private vendors, but also the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency publishes and distributes updates on vulnerabilities that exist for companies and .govs that can ensure that they're at least creating that outer shell, right? We think of things as concentric circles of defense and expanding that perimeter, the defensive perimeter outward. It starts with your networks. It also starts with the people. But it begins also with the education of your workforce and staying on top of the latest threats, generative AI, as I mentioned, and AI tools being used, unfortunately, by malicious actors is really not on the horizon. It's here. It's happening.
It is. I've talked to some other folks that are here, and they were talking about how smart these threat actors are getting, because what they're targeting is the role of the person. So it used to be this blanket email that would, you can kind of see that it isn't quite right.
Absolutely.
But now they're targeting roles and they're regionalizing the conversation, and there's all these things that make it a little harder to see, or
100%. Programs like ChatGPT are able to very rapidly, almost instantaneously, manufacture an email in perfect, grammatically correct English, tailored to your CEO or your CIO, and masking as though it came from another employee. So you have to be wary. Multi-factor authentication.
Yes.
And quite frankly, it's old school, but pick up the phone and verify with your employee or your superior.
Right, and so the kinds of hygiene that we're getting used to in our own life, where if someone sent us what we thought was a phishing, we wouldn't just give away our social security or that kind of thing. How do we get employees to be thinking about protecting the organization, or thinking, shifting their mindset from just coming in and doing their work and having part of their kit bag be, I have to protect my organization as part of an ecosystem, part of a new way.
That ecosystem approach is absolutely essential, and looking at it from an orientation standpoint, making cybersecurity part of the orientation curriculum, for example, and explaining to your workforce that this is as important as locking the front door when you leave at night, right?
Yeah.
More important in some cases. So, because you can always recover from a burglary, for instance, if you're talking about a brick and mortar location. But when we're talking about trade secrets, when you're talking about malware placed on a network that can really take down your entire company and cost you, in some cases, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and depending on the size of the company. Nothing's more serious and nothing's more important than teaching your workforce those threats exist.
And you mentioned CISA earlier. Let's say the URLs in case people aren't very savvy about it. CISA.gov, right?
CISA.gov.
CISA.gov.
Sure, right? And I would also direct your audience to HSI.gov.
Okay.
Homeland Security Investigations. HSI.gov, where if you are the victim of a crime, there's our tip line on there. You can learn more about what we do as an agency, as a transnational criminal investigative agency, with a robust global presence and the ability to respond pretty much anywhere in the world, and certainly anywhere in the United States.
So if I'm a business that has business overseas or just in the U.S., it applies to me equally, right?
Absolutely.
And what does that typically look like? A Homeland Security investigator might help me?
Well, ideally, we're a criminal investigative agency, so our primary goal is to get attribution to the threat and ultimately identify.
Find out who did it.
Try to get the money back if we can. But go through the judicial process to do so. Now it's a journey. It's a long process, but we're very good at what we do. We're very good at catching bad guys in a variety of capacities, but in particular cyber. We've got some of the best cyber investigators, I believe, in the world. Certainly,
You're proud of them?
I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of the workforce that we train and that we deploy around the globe. But main thing is to call somebody. Call law enforcement if you are the victim. There are ways to at least try to get help for an attack.
And that's one of your first calls, right? Get that in place. You've been attacked, right? And you're not sure exactly, you don't have your legs. You haven't had this happen to you before. So now there's a couple calls, right?
There is. And again, the main thing is to call somebody. We take a victim-centered approach. We don't name and shame. We don't, we're not a regulatory agency in that respect that we're going to, administer a fine or something because we forgot to patch. But our goal is to, again, find the criminal actor or organization who's responsible for this, and ideally seize their assets and hold them accountable.
Probably not their first day at the rodeo either, huh?
Absolutely not.
So, well, I appreciate the insight. Thank you so much for coming behind the scenes after your presentation today. I know we already got some rave reviews about it.
Great,
So
glad to hear.
thank you for your
having me.
time
Great.
and appreciate you coming.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us today at the Cybersecurity Summit podcast. See you next week. We invite you to join our Cyber Pro community on LinkedIn at Cybersecurity Summit.